There are moments in life when something within you begins to whisper, so softly at first that you almost miss it. A voice beneath the noise, beneath the endless rushing, beneath all the masks you've worn to survive. It doesn't shout, it simply asks, what if you stopped holding on? You take a moment to contemplate. You wake up to the fact that a large part of your living time is gone. Gone to the memories that hurt. Gone to the people who are no longer there. Gone to the different aspects of yourself that are not living in the same environment with you anymore. You have created multiple realities out of your fears of losing them. Still, the void is there with you in some way. A time comes, silently, almost holily, when the burden of keeping holding on becomes more than the apprehension of letting go. When the suffering of liberation is felt as being lighter than the fatigue of attachment. That is the point where this tale starts. This is not a narrative about ceasing to remember. It does not deal with wiping out the past or acting as if the heart did not suffer. It is more about the process of learning to open up your palms once again. It is more about the process of learning to remain soft in a world that has trained you to become tough. It is more about the process of realizing that giving up is not equivalent to losing. At times, it is the only path to the return. You are not broken for wanting peace. You are not weak for needing rest. You are not lost for outgrowing who you once were. This is your invitation. To stop surviving your life and to start inhabiting it. To release what was never yours to hold forever. To make room for what has been trying, patiently, to find its way in. If you are tired of carrying what no longer fits, if you are ready to meet yourself again, if you are ready to walk without knowing exactly where the path leads, then take a breath. Let your shoulders fall. Let your guard down. You have already done the hardest part. You have arrived. Now gently, let us begin. There are moments in life when the hands that once held everything begin to tremble. Not from weakness, but from the unbearable weight of holding on too long. We grasp memories, people, identities, and dreams as if they are lifelines. Yet, with time, what we hold begins to hold us. What we once loved begins to define the walls of our own cage. Letting go is often mistaken for giving up. It isn't. It is an act of quiet courage, a rebellion against the fear that tells you that without what you cling to, you are nothing. It is the art of unbinding the heart from the illusion of permanence. We grow attached not just to people, but to who we were with them. You remember how you laughed in their presence, how your reflection seemed brighter, how the world felt safer. You hold that version of yourself like a fragile artifact, afraid that releasing the relationship means erasing who you were. But identity is not a photograph. It is a river. You are not the same water that flowed yesterday, yet you are still the river. Letting go begins when we recognize this truth. Nothing truly leaves us, it merely changes form. The love that once filled the air remains, but it becomes a quiet wisdom resting in the corners of your heart. The dreams that dissolved into silence leave behind a residue of strength, a kind of spiritual callus reminding you of your own endurance. It is not the absence of things that defines loss. It is the space they leave behind, and what we choose to fill it with. In that space, something else wants to emerge, but it cannot breathe while your fists are clenched. So you begin with something simple. You exhale, you let the breath go, and it returns. The body understands the rhythm of release. It has been doing it all along. Perhaps the soul does too. It just forgot. You start noticing how every morning asks you to release the night, how every season teaches you to surrender without resentment. The trees do not weep when their leaves fall, they trust in renewal. But we, fragile as we are, confuse letting go with losing. Maybe because we've been taught that to be complete, we must hold on to everything that once mattered. But wholeness is not the sum of all we have loved. It's the grace with which we can let it all go and still remain ourselves. There comes a point when your heart whispers, "This is heavy." And that whisper is not weakness, it's truth. You have carried something long enough. And in that admission, something inside begins to soften. You begin to see that what you're letting go of isn't the person, the dream, or the time. It's the illusion that it was the only version of happiness available to you. It's the story that told you that you cannot exist without them. But you can. You have. And you will again. You will find that letting go is not an act of erasure. It's an act of remembrance. You remember who you were before the grasping began. You remember the stillness of your own being, untouched by loss, untangled from expectation. You remember that peace is not something you earn. It's what remains when everything unnecessary is gone. There will be nights when you doubt this, when silence feels cruel and emptiness echoes too loudly. You'll reach for something familiar, something to fill the void. But that is the moment to pause, to breathe, and to ask yourself, what if this emptiness is not a wound, but a window? A window through which something new can enter, something you could not see before because your hands were too full. Grief is the bridge between what was and what will be. To cross it, you must travel lightly. And that means loosening your grip, one finger at a time. Sometimes letting go happens in a single shattering moment. More often, it's a slow fading, a gentle unraveling of what once was. You wake up one morning and realize that the ache has softened, that you can remember without drowning, that the memory is no longer a chain, but a song. That is how healing sounds. Soft, almost imperceptible. You will still miss them. You will still long for what could have been. But the longing no longer defines you. It becomes a quiet hum beneath your steps, guiding you, reminding you of the depth of your capacity to feel, to love, and to continue. Because the truth is this, you are not what you've lost. You are what remains after the loss. You are the space that makes room for the next sunrise, the next heartbeat, the next version of yourself waiting patiently to be born. And when you finally let go, you don't fall, you rise. Not into who you were, but into who you're becoming. Letting go is not a doorway you walk through once. It's a lifelong art. It asks for tenderness each time, because what we release often carries a part of us. But every release creates space, and in that space, the soul breathes more freely. It's like untying knots in your own being. Each knot holds a memory, a fear, a what if. You untangle them gently, and as you do, light begins to move through again. You realize that your worth was never tied to what you held. It was always in the hands that had the courage to open. The world may not notice this kind of bravery. There are no medals for emotional release, no applause for spiritual surrender. But within you, there's a quiet shift, a sense of alignment with something infinite, something unshakable. You no longer chase closure. You live in flow. You stop waiting for the past to explain itself. You stop trying to rewrite the story so it hurts less. Instead, you begin to trust that the pain was a necessary language, teaching you to read yourself more clearly. And when you look back, it's not with regret, it's with reverence. You see that every ending was a threshold, every heartbreak was a door, and every loss was an invitation to return home, to yourself. You have never truly lost anything that was meant for your becoming. Some things simply complete their purpose and dissolve. Others transform and meet you again in new forms. A stranger's kindness, a sudden moment of peace. A morning where you wake and realize the weight has gone. This is the art of letting go, to bless what was, to honor what remains, and to trust what's coming. You are still you. Not less, not broken, just more spacious, more honest, more alive. And somewhere within that quiet expansion, you will find that you were never losing yourself. You were finally finding her. When something leaves your life, it rarely leaves in silence. Even after it's gone, it lingers, in the shape of your thoughts, in the rhythm of your days, in the subtle way your heart still listens for footsteps that no longer come. Absence has its own sound, its own gravity. It pulls at the soul, asking questions that have no answers. You may find yourself walking through familiar rooms, noticing the spaces where presence used to live. A chair that remains untouched. A phrase that rises unbidden in your mind. And though you know it's over, though you've told yourself it's time, Your heart keeps turning toward the ghost of what was, as if love were a compass refusing to reset. This is the echo beneath the empty space, the resonance of what once mattered. You can't silence it. You can only listen differently. Letting go does not mean the end of feeling. It means learning to live with echoes without trying to fill them. It's understanding that not every silence demands to be broken, and not every ache requires a cure. Some pain simply wants to be witnessed, not solved. You sit in that stillness, and for a while, it hurts. Your body remembers what comfort felt like. Your mind replays the soft laughter, the promises, the warmth that once wrapped around your existence. It feels unbearable at first, because it is not just a person or dream you're missing. It's the version of yourself that existed inside that love, that place, that certainty. But over time, something begins to shift. You stop fighting the silence. You start breathing with it. And in that stillness, you begin to hear something else beneath the echo, a softer sound, quieter but truer. It's your own voice, the one you silenced while you were busy holding on. It doesn't speak loudly at first. It comes as a whisper. I'm still here. And that whisper is enough. You start noticing small moments of aliveness again. The warmth of sunlight through the window. The sound of rain tracing the glass. The taste of your morning coffee. They are ordinary things, yet they hold an unfamiliar beauty. Because when you lose something significant, even the smallest gestures of life feel sacred. They remind you that existence continues, that the world has not ended, that you are still capable of wonder. But the heart, being tender and human, still circles back. You will still wake in the night and reach for what's no longer there. You will still feel the phantom weight of what you used to carry. That's not regression, it's rhythm. Healing moves like the tide. Forward, backward, always returning, but never exactly the same. Each wave brings you closer to shore. You begin to understand that emptiness is not an enemy. It's a kind of space-making, a clearing. The universe does not subtract without reason. It creates room for what's next. When you lose something or someone, it's not the world closing in. It's the world preparing to widen in another direction. But first, you must endure the echo. You must allow yourself to be hollow for a while. Because only a hollow vessel can receive. There's a kind of humility that grows from loss. It strips away illusions, teaches you how small you really are, how little control you truly have. And in that surrender, you begin to see a strange beauty. Life has always been asking you to trust it. The person you were before, the one who believed that holding on meant love, starts to dissolve, and from her fading, a wiser self begins to emerge. She doesn't seek permanence anymore, she seeks presence. She doesn't cling, she communes. She understands that everything she touches is temporary, and that is what makes it precious. There is a peace that lives only on the other side of grief. You cannot skip the journey to reach it. You have to walk through the ache, through the questions, through the echo of all you've released. And one day, without fanfare or notice, you'll realize that the echo has changed. It's still there, but softer, more like music than pain. It doesn't beg for your attention anymore. It hums quietly in the background of your becoming. It's no longer the sound of what's gone. It's the melody of what remains. Because loss doesn't erase love, it refines it. What once lived outside of you now lives within. And that is the quiet miracle of letting go. You don't lose love, you absorb it. The world begins to open again. New faces appear, not to replace what was lost, but to remind you that connection is infinite, ever renewing. You laugh again, not because the pain has vanished, but because joy and sorrow have learned to coexist. You start building small rituals of renewal, writing, walking, breathing, creating. Each act is a conversation with life saying, "I'm still here. Teach me how to begin again." And life responds, not with grand gestures, but with moments of grace. The way light falls on your hands, the kindness of a stranger, the silence that no longer hurts but holds you. Letting go was never about forgetting. It was about remembering yourself more fully. It was about realizing that your worth was never bound to what stayed. You were always whole, even when you felt broken. You were always growing, even when you thought you were standing still. And now, when you look into the space once filled with longing, you see something different. Not emptiness, but possibility. Not loss, but expansion. You understand that endings are not the opposite of beginnings. They're their secret doorway. The echo remains, yes, but it no longer defines you. It accompanies you like a song from another lifetime, one that taught you the meaning of tenderness and release. You listen with gratitude, not grief. You bow to what was and step forward into what is. This is how healing truly works, not in sudden freedom, but in the quiet acceptance of the echo that lives on, reshaped, softened, and transformed. You learn to live beside it, to let it hum beneath your laughter, to let it remind you of all the ways you have loved and survived. And as the days pass, something miraculous happens. You begin to fill the space, not with replacements, but with light. Not with distraction, but with depth. Not with fear of losing again, but with trust that even if you do, you will know how to let go without losing yourself. Because now you understand. Every echo fades when met with presence. Every loss softens when held with love. And every time you release what's gone, you return. More open, more tender, more whole. At first, light doesn't come back with certainty. It arrives gently, cautiously, like a bird testing the air after the storm. For a long time, the world felt colorless to you. Every sound carried the memory of what used to be. Every morning looked the same. Pale, hesitant, unsure whether to rise or not. But one day, something shifts. You don't even notice it at first. A single ray slips through the blinds. The world outside is still quiet, but you catch yourself watching the way dust floats in sunlight, and for a fleeting second, you forget the heaviness. That second is everything. It is not recovery. It is remembrance. A reminder that life has always known how to find its way back. Healing doesn't arrive as a storm of change. It moves like a whisper, like water seeping through stone. You wake, you breathe, you eat, you move, and one day, you realize you are no longer surviving. You are, quietly, beginning to live. You start hearing the world again. The sound of rain no longer feels like sorrow. It feels like a lullaby. You watch the branches outside your window swaying, not as symbols of loss, but as signs of continuity. The world has never stopped speaking. It was you who went silent for a while. Now you begin to listen again. It's not that the pain has vanished, it has simply changed language. It no longer screams, it hums. It no longer consumes, it reminds. Every ache has softened into a memory, and every memory has become a teacher. You begin to understand that letting go was never about losing love. It was about transforming it. What you once reached for outside of yourself now rises from within. The warmth that once depended on someone's presence now glows quietly in your own chest. It is smaller, yes, but it is yours. This stage of healing is fragile, and you must walk gently. There will be moments when the light feels too bright, when the newness of joy frightens you. After long darkness, even hope can feel like a risk. You will ask yourself, what if I break again? And the answer will come softly. Then you will rise again too. You've done it before. Every heartbreak was proof of your endurance. Every letting go was a rehearsal for becoming. You are learning that your worth was never meant to depend on permanence. That love was never supposed to be a cage, but a current. That even when everything you knew dissolves, what remains is always you, breathing, sensing, transforming. One afternoon you walk outside and feel the wind on your face. It's the same wind that brushed against you in happier times. Yet now it feels different. Gentler. Wiser. Because you are different. The wind hasn't changed. Your ability to feel it has. You no longer chase happiness like something distant. You find it in fragments. In the warmth of tea between your hands, in a stranger's smile, in the sudden realization that your heart is not constantly aching anymore. The soul doesn't heal through forgetting. It heals by relearning how to see beauty without needing it to erase the past. You begin to notice how the morning light lingers longer, how your laughter no longer feels borrowed, how silence no longer frightens you. That's when you know you are returning to yourself. Not the self you were before everything fell apart, but the one that was waiting beneath all the noise, quiet, patient, eternal. This return is not loud. It does not announce itself. It moves slowly, like a tide reclaiming the shore. Every small act of choosing life again is an act of resurrection. There will still be moments of sadness, but they no longer define the shape of your days. They visit like brief rain, not endless storms. You've learned to let them come and let them go. And in that rhythm, holding and releasing, grieving and breathing, you've found your balance again. That balance is grace. It's the moment when you realize you can carry your past without becoming it. You remember who you were when you first learned how to love, and you forgive who you became when you forgot how to let go. Now you hold both with tenderness, the innocent and the wounded, the hopeful and the weary. They are not opposites. They are roots of the same tree. And when you speak to yourself now, your voice has changed. It is kinder. You no longer demand healing. You invite it. You no longer force meaning. You allow it to unfold. Healing has made you gentler, but not weaker. You know now that softness is not fragility. It is strength refined by pain. You know now that light is not always blazing. It is sometimes just steady enough to guide you home. One evening, you stand beneath the sky, and it feels vast again. You realize how much time has passed since you last looked up without grief pulling your gaze down. The stars are the same, but tonight, you don't feel small beneath them. You feel connected. Every loss, every silence, every release, it all brought you here, to this still point between what was and what's becoming. And in that stillness, you understand something you never did before. Letting go was not the end of your story. It was the space that made this new chapter possible. Pain carved out the room where peace could live. Darkness taught you how to recognize the light when it returned. So now, when the morning comes again, and it always does, you no longer brace yourself. You open your eyes, you breathe, you smile, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally learned how to be okay, even when it isn't. This is what the light teaches, that it will always return to those who make room for it, that it will find you in your stillness, not your striving, that you were never truly lost. You were simply being softened for the day you could hold light again without fear of breaking. And when it finally fills you, quietly, completely, you whisper to the world, not in triumph, but in truth, "I'm still here." And the world answers, as it always has. Welcome home. There comes a time after the breaking when you begin to see what has survived. The noise fades. The dust settles. And for the first time in a long while, you can finally look around. Not at what is gone, but at what remains. You stand among the remnants of your own becoming. There are fragments of who you were scattered across the ground, dreams, fears, old desires, the quiet ghosts of promises once believed. They do not speak anymore. They simply rest. It is then that you realize something subtle but profound. Not everything you've carried deserves to come with you. Letting go, you see now, was only the first act. The next is choosing what stays. You look at your own heart as if it were a landscape after the storm. Some parts are untouched, others uprooted. And as you walk through it, you begin to understand that healing is not only about release, it is about curation. To heal is to become the careful guardian of your own energy. For a long time, you mistook endurance for strength. You thought that to be whole, you had to carry everything, every memory, every lesson, every scar. But the truth is quieter, simpler, and far more radical. You were never meant to hold it all. You were meant to hold only what helps you grow. The heart, after all, is not a vault. It is a garden. And gardens thrive not by keeping everything, but by allowing what no longer nourishes to return to the earth. So you begin to sort through your own inner soil. You touch an old memory and feel the ache still living there. You ask it gently, "Are you ready to rest now?" You open a drawer in your mind and find a regret, folded and worn. You hold it up to the light, see the years it's stolen, and whisper, "You've done enough. You can go." You do this not out of resentment, but out of mercy, because even your pain deserves peace. At first, it feels strange to let go of even the things that hurt you. We grow accustomed to our suffering. It becomes familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. There's safety in what we already know, even when it limits us. But eventually, you will feel the truth in your bones. Comfort is not the same as peace. Comfort keeps you still. Peace lets you move. You will realize that some people too belong to the past version of you. Not because they were bad, but because they no longer meet you where you now stand. And it will hurt to admit this. You will want to hold them a little longer, as if by doing so you could bridge the distance that growth creates. But love that is honest must sometimes let itself end. There is a maturity that comes when you stop trying to drag everything and everyone into your future. Not out of coldness, but out of respect for yourself and for the natural rhythm of life. You begin to see that not all endings are tragedies. Some are simply the soul's way of clearing space for what's next. You start to live differently now. You speak more softly, not because you're afraid, but because you no longer need to prove your worth. You say no more often, and you don't explain. You learn that saying no is not rejection, it's redirection. Every boundary you set is a quiet prayer for alignment. And as you begin to travel lighter, something remarkable happens. You start to feel the world again. The air feels cleaner. The silence no longer suffocates, it holds you. You walk slower, noticing small things you once overlooked. The flicker of candlelight, the texture of a page, the sound of your own breath echoing gently against the quiet walls of your being. This is what space feels like. This is what healing sounds like when it stops screaming and starts whispering. In this stillness, you begin to rediscover what truly belongs to you. Not possessions, not people, not roles or reputations, but qualities. Gentleness, compassion, patience, truth. These are the treasures that endure every loss, every season. They are not what the world gives you. They are what remain when the world takes everything else away. Sometimes you will feel the pull to go back, to revisit what you've buried, to reopen what is already closed. That is normal. Healing is not linear. It circles like the moon. But each time you revisit, you'll find you stay a little less, hurt a little less, and understand a little more. Until one day, you visit not out of longing, but out of gratitude. You will look back and thank the very things that once broke you, because without them, you would never have learned the art of discernment, the sacred skill of knowing what to hold and what to let fall through your fingers. And when you look at your hands now, you notice something beautiful. They are no longer clenched. They no longer tremble from the effort of keeping everything together. They are open, steady, alive, capable of receiving. You begin to see that openness is not emptiness, it's readiness. Readiness to love again, readiness to trust again, readiness to begin without needing to know how it will end. The lightness you feel now isn't absence, it's freedom. And freedom has a sound all its own. It's the sound of breath unburdened, of laughter unforced, of silence that feels like home. People may not notice this change in you right away. They may still remember the version of you who always carried too much. But you will know. You will feel the difference every time you walk into a room and your heart no longer drags behind you. Every time you speak and your voice comes from calm instead of defense. Every time you look at your reflection and recognize not who you were but who you've become. You'll see it in the way you forgive faster, in the way you let conversations end without fear, in the way you stop chasing closure, because peace no longer depends on explanation. And you'll understand that this simplicity, this lightness, is the quiet reward of release. The peace you once begged for was never outside of you. It was waiting beneath the weight of all you refused to put down. Now, as you move through your days, you carry less, but feel more. You listen deeper. You love slower, but truer. You no longer need to possess what you cherish. You simply experience it. And that is enough. When night comes, you rest without guilt. When morning breaks, you rise without dread. Because you finally trust that life will give you what belongs to you, and take what no longer does. And that both are acts of grace. You have learned the gentle strength of release. You have learned that what you keep becomes what you are. So now you choose carefully. You keep kindness, you keep patience, you keep truth, and you let the rest go, again and again, until what remains is only what's real. And when that moment comes, when all the unnecessary has fallen away, you'll find yourself standing in the quiet center of your own life, unburdened, clear, at peace. You'll realize that you've finally mastered the art, not of holding on, but of holding yourself, lightly, tenderly, completely. And that perhaps was what all this was for. It happens quietly on an ordinary day. You're pouring coffee or walking through the noise of a busy street when something shifts in the air. A scent, a sound, a stray memory, something small and uninvited. And suddenly, the past is standing beside you again. Not as loud as before. Not demanding to be felt. Just there. This is how the past returns, not as a storm, but as a soft knocking at the edges of your awareness. And in that moment, you are tested, not by pain, but by remembrance. You've come far. You've learned the rhythm of letting go, the gentleness of release. But healing does not mean forgetting. It means learning how to meet the past without collapsing into it. You pause, feeling that familiar tug in your chest. It's not the ache of wanting, but the quiet nostalgia of once having loved deeply. There was a time when that feeling would have unraveled you, when the memory of a voice or a place or a name would have pulled you back into longing. But now, it's different. You stand taller in the presence of what used to own you. You realize that the past is not an enemy to defeat, but a guest to greet. It comes not to reclaim you, but to remind you of how far you've come. You can smile now at what once broke you. You can look back without the need to go back. There's grace in this moment, the grace of distance, the beauty of space. You feel compassion for the person you were, the one who didn't know yet how to let go. You don't pity them, you honor them. Because every step they took, every mistake they made, every heartbreak they endured, it all brought you here, to this steadier version of yourself. You understand now that the past doesn't fade because you erase it. It fades because you've outgrown its shape. You are no longer the same size as your old pain. It can visit, but it cannot stay. Still, there's a part of you that hesitates. There's tenderness in the remembering. You touch the echo gently, like tracing an old scar. Not to reopen it, but to feel how it has healed. And in that touch, you realize something profound. The pain is gone, but the love remains. Love doesn't die when the story ends. It changes form. It becomes compassion, wisdom, quiet strength. It becomes the way you speak softly now, the way you listen deeper, the way you understand others without needing to fix them. The past has become your teacher. Not the kind that punishes, but the kind that waits patiently until you're ready to see. It shows you that nothing was wasted, not even the heartbreaks that felt like endings. Every loss shaped your tenderness. Every disappointment deepened your empathy. You begin to see your timeline differently now. Not as a series of mistakes, but as a slow unveiling of who you truly are. Every goodbye was an introduction to your next becoming. So when the past knocks softly, you don't slam the door. You open it, you nod, and you let it speak. You listen, not because you owe it something, but because it deserves closure, and you are strong enough to give it that. Sometimes the past arrives through people. A message you didn't expect. A face you thought you'd never see again. In those moments, your heart may tremble, remembering what once was. But trembling doesn't mean regression. It means recognition. It means your heart still feels, but it also knows. You no longer confuse familiarity with belonging. You understand that some connections are meant to be chapters, not homes. That some love stories teach you how to love yourself better in their absence. And if you must meet someone from your past again, you do so with open eyes. You see them clearly, not through longing, but through truth. You don't need to prove that you've changed. You simply are changed, and your silence speaks it louder than words ever could. You might share a smile, exchange a few gentle words, and feel the strange sweetness of closure unspoken. Then you walk away, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Because even though it ended, it mattered. And that is enough. You continue walking through your life, and every so often the past will still reach out. Through dreams, through songs, through the scent of rain on old streets. But now, it no longer feels like a trap. It feels like a memory resting peacefully, content to be remembered and released. You start to see time not as a line, but as a circle. Every version of you still exists somewhere, each one carrying its own ache, its own light. And when the past visits, it's really just an earlier version of you asking to be acknowledged. So you pause. You whisper inwardly, I remember you. I forgive you. I thank you. And then you keep walking. There is no need to chase closure anymore. You've learned that closure is not a door slamming shut. It's the moment you realize the door was open all along, and you no longer need to walk through it. Life moves forward, gently, constantly, and now you move with it instead of against it. You begin to carry your past the way one carries a photograph, close, but not consuming. Something to glance at when you need to remember how far you've come, but never something to live inside again. Because this is the gift of healing. You learn to love without clinging, to remember without pain, to exist without needing to rewrite what has already been written. You understand at last that peace doesn't come from forgetting the past, but from no longer needing it to be different. And in that quiet acceptance, something opens inside you. A vast, calm space where everything belongs, yet nothing controls you. The past still knocks sometimes, softly, respectfully. And you, smiling, simply nod and say, thank you for coming. But I live here now, in the present. And as you close the door gently behind you, you realize that every chapter you once feared to revisit has already found its resting place. Inside a heart that finally knows how to hold everything lightly. Freedom does not arrive with thunder. It does not tear the sky open or sweep through the door in triumph. It comes quietly, like dawn creeping across the edge of a window. Soft, hesitant, almost uncertain if it's welcome after the long night. For so long, you equated freedom with escape. You thought it meant running fast enough, far enough, so the past could never find you. You thought it meant forgetting, cutting away, erasing the marks that memory left behind. But now, in this quieter place, you see it differently. Freedom is not the absence of attachment. It's the presence of understanding. It's not running away from the chains. It's realizing they were never locked. You wake one morning and notice something small. Your chest feels lighter. The ache that used to whisper with every breath is fading. You make your coffee, you sit by the window, and you don't fill the silence with thoughts. You simply sit, and for the first time in years, the stillness doesn't hurt. It holds you. That's freedom. Not the dramatic kind, not the cinematic kind, but the kind that moves like a sigh at the end of grief. The kind that returns to you after you've made peace with what cannot be changed. You have learned that real liberation begins not when everything is perfect, but when you stop demanding that it should be. There was a time when you fought the world. Every unanswered prayer felt like betrayal. Every closed door felt like punishment. You thought that life owed you fairness, that love owed you permanence. And so you tightened your grip, desperate to hold everything together. But holding on became a kind of prison. The tighter you clung, the smaller you became. The more you tried to control, the less you felt alive. Freedom began the day you stopped fighting. Not because you gave up, but because you finally saw that the battle was never outside you. It was within. It was your own resistance that kept you bound. When you stopped insisting that life makes sense, when you stopped demanding that love stay, when you stopped punishing yourself for being human, the doors opened quietly, almost as if they had been waiting all along. And you walked out, not into a new world, but into the same one you'd always lived in. Only now you could finally see it. There is a strange beauty in realizing that nothing around you has changed, and yet everything feels different. The trees look softer, the air feels cleaner. The silence is no longer a void, but a vastness. Freedom is not about changing the scenery, it's about changing your gaze. You no longer look for meaning in what is left, you find it in what remains. You no longer chase peace as if it were hidden somewhere in the distance. You recognize that it was never a place to reach, but a way to see. And what you see now is enough. You begin to move differently, not with urgency, but with presence. You no longer rush to fill the quiet moments with sound. You no longer need to prove that you're healed. You live without the performance of progress. Some days you still feel the shadow of what once was. The echoes still visit, but they no longer rule you. They sit beside you like old companions, familiar, but no longer frightening. You can listen without falling back. You can remember without unraveling. This, too, is freedom. Freedom is the space between reaction and response. It's the second you take before you speak, the breath that lets grace enter. It's the moment you choose peace over drama, stillness over noise, truth over comfort. It's quiet, almost invisible, but it changes everything. You find yourself drawn to simplicity now. Not the kind that hides from the world, but the kind that holds it gently without needing to own it. You declutter not just your home, but your mind. You let go of the urge to explain your choices. You stop offering endless apologies for being who you are. The voice inside that once whispered, "You're not enough," has grown softer. Not silenced, but transformed. Now it says, "You are here and that is enough." You start to trust time again. You no longer rush its unfolding. You understand that what's meant for you will find you when you're ready, not when you're desperate. Freedom is patience disguised as faith. It's the willingness to sit inside the not knowing, to let uncertainty breathe. It's realizing that answers come only when you've stopped demanding them. There was a time when solitude felt like punishment. Now it feels sacred. You sit alone, but not lonely. You light a candle, not to fill the darkness, but to honor it. You whisper softly into the still air, "I am allowed to rest." Because you've learned that the world does not crumble when you stop trying to hold it up. You no longer confuse exhaustion with purpose. You no longer glorify suffering as proof of love. You understand that peace is not laziness, that gentleness is not weakness, that quiet is not absence. Freedom has changed the way you love. You no longer reach out to possess, but to connect. You no longer fear loss, because you've learned that everything true finds its way back in another form. You love not because you need to, but because it's your nature to. When you meet someone now, you do not hand them your heart as proof of worth. You invite them to sit beside your peace. If they can hold it gently, they may stay. If not, you still remain whole. This is the difference. You are no longer seeking halves to complete you. You have become your own wholeness. And yet, this freedom isn't loud or proud. It's subtle, humble, reverent. It doesn't crave attention. It craves authenticity. It asks for nothing but truth. You have learned to say no, not from fear, but from clarity. You have learned to say yes, not from need, but from joy. You understand now that boundaries are not walls. They are the shape of self-respect. They are how freedom sustains itself. And sometimes, freedom is simply the moment you stop explaining why you deserve it. At night, you lie down and feel your heartbeat steady. You think of all the years you chased approval, all the ways you tried to earn love, and all the times you mistook control for safety. And you smile, because even those years had purpose. They brought you here, to this quiet knowing that nothing you have lost has diminished you. If anything, it has refined you. The more you release, the more you become. The more you let go, the clearer your reflection becomes in the mirror of the present. And when you look into that mirror now, you no longer search for who you were. You meet your own eyes and whisper, "You made it through. You made it home." That is the quiet shape of freedom. To arrive where you are, without apology, without defense, and to stay there, unhurried, unashamed. Freedom is not the end of the journey. It is the way you walk now. It's the rhythm of your breath, the softness of your choices, the patience in your waiting, the grace in your letting be. You no longer demand that life be light all the time. You honor the shadows, too, because they give the light its meaning. You understand that freedom is not always bliss, it's awareness. And awareness, even when heavy, is always a kind of truth. So you keep moving, one breath, one step, one gentle surrender at a time. Not racing toward peace, but walking with it. Not clutching at life, but meeting it open-handed. The world continues in its chaos, but you no longer match its noise. You live at a slower frequency now, somewhere between silence and song, between solitude and connection, between effort and ease. And when someone asks what freedom feels like, you don't give them words. You give them presence. You let them feel the calm that lives in your bones. Because true freedom cannot be explained. It can only be lived. You close your eyes. You breathe in deeply. The air enters easily, as if the world itself is whispering back. You've arrived. And maybe, just maybe, this is what the soul was seeking all along. Not escape. Not control. Not certainty. But this simple, unshakable peace of being fully, quietly free. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when you stop chasing after what's next and finally realize that life was never waiting for your permission to begin. It has been unfolding all along, quietly, patiently, while you were busy reaching forward or looking back. For so many years, you mistook motion for meaning. You believed that purpose was always elsewhere, that peace existed only on the other side of achievement, that happiness lived somewhere in the distance. You moved quickly, thought quickly, felt quickly. And in all that speed, you missed the small miracle that was already happening in the stillness around you. It's strange, isn't it, how we spend entire seasons preparing to live. We say, once I heal, once I understand, once I arrive, then I will rest. But the truth you are beginning to touch now, the one that hums quietly beneath the noise, is that you were never meant to chase your life. You were meant to inhabit it. The present has always been here, like an open hand waiting for you to unclench your fist. It has watched you struggle against time, watched you carry the past like armor, watched you plan the future like salvation. And all the while, it whispered softly, "You can come home now." At first, you didn't hear it. You mistook stillness for emptiness. You thought quiet meant nothing was happening. But now, as you begin to slow down, truly slow down, you discover that stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the fullness of being. The world is not silent. It's just speaking in a frequency that requires your attention. You notice the sound of your own breath, steady, deliberate, forgiving. You notice how light lands on your hands when you reach for a glass of water. You notice how each heartbeat arrives and leaves without permission, and how, somehow, that rhythm has kept you alive through every storm. Presence is not something you learn, it's something you remember. It's the natural state you were born with, before fear taught you how to leave the moment. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop treating time like a ladder to climb. When you realize that the past is not behind you and the future is not ahead. They both exist here, in the pulse of now. Everything you've ever been, everything you'll ever become, lives in this breath. You start to feel it, in the slow unfolding of a morning, in the quiet hum of your surroundings. The urge to rush begins to fade. You no longer measure your worth by productivity. You stop filling silence with noise, and in that absence, something beautiful begins to grow. Awareness. Awareness of how your body carries memory. Awareness of how your mind wanders and returns like the tide. Awareness of how even pain has its own kind of stillness when you stop trying to silence it. To belong to the present is not to abandon your past, it's to forgive it. It's to allow everything that has shaped you to coexist within you without demand for explanation. It's to say, yes, that happened, and still, I am here. You begin to walk differently. Each step feels deliberate, grounded. You don't rush toward your destination anymore. You notice the way your foot meets the earth, the way sound and weight and air all move in harmony. You are not walking through time, you are walking through yourself. And the more you walk this way, the more the world begins to soften. The pressure to become gives way to the permission to be. You understand now that the future is not something waiting for you. It is something you are building in every breath, every word, every gentle choice. Presence transforms even the simplest moments. Drinking tea becomes prayer. Listening becomes devotion. Resting becomes trust. The ordinary turns luminous when you stop demanding it to be extraordinary. It's not always easy to stay here. The mind will tug at you with old stories. Regret will try to seduce you with its familiarity. Hope will try to pull you forward, promising more. But presence asks for faith in the unseen. It asks you to believe that this, right now, is enough. When you catch yourself drifting, you no longer scold your wandering thoughts. You smile, take a breath, and bring yourself back. You say softly, "Come home." And with time, that simple act becomes sacred. Each return becomes a small miracle. There will still be chaos around you. The world will still shout and rush and demand. But you will move differently within it. Calm in the middle of noise, slow in the middle of urgency. You'll stop mistaking movement for purpose. You'll stop apologizing for taking your time. Because you've learned that life isn't asking you to race it, it's asking you to meet it. The present, you realize, is not passive. It's alive. It doesn't wait for you, it participates with you. When you're truly here, you can feel it. How the breeze responds to your breath, how the silence listens back, how the world mirrors the energy you bring to it. You start to feel a kind of belonging you've never known. Not the belonging that depends on being accepted, but the kind that comes from finally accepting yourself. You belong because you exist. You belong because you breathe. You belong because this moment would not be the same without you in it. And in that realization, the world changes. Colors feel deeper. Music sounds truer. You find yourself crying sometimes for no reason other than the sheer privilege of being alive. You stop waiting for permission to feel joy. You let it find you in the smallest places, the warmth of water, the hum of a streetlight, the softness of your own hand against your skin. Belonging to the present also means learning how to let each moment die, to love it fully and then release it. You cannot hold the now. It's too alive for that. It dissolves the moment you try to keep it. And yet, something of it always stays. You are made of 1,000 moments that have already left, and still, you remain. That's the paradox of presence. It teaches you impermanence without fear. It teaches you how to lose without feeling lost. It shows you that endings are not interruptions, but transformations. Even grief, when met in presence, softens into grace. Because when you stop running from it, you realize that grief is just love with nowhere left to go. And when you give it space to breathe, it doesn't consume you. It becomes part of your strength. You understand now that nothing you feel needs to be permanent to be meaningful. You don't have to fix your emotions, you only have to witness them. Joy, sorrow, fear, peace, they all pass through you like weather across a vast landscape. And you are the sky. You hold it all. This is what it means to belong to the present, to stop clinging to what was, to stop fearing what will be, and to stand gently in what is. You are no longer waiting for the right time. You are living it. You are no longer searching for the path. You are walking it. You are no longer asking for signs. You are becoming one. When the world rushes, you stay slow. When everything feels uncertain, you stay soft. You've discovered that peace is not found in control, but in participation. You don't need to hold the moment still to honor it. You only need to be awake to it. And so, each day, you begin again. Not because yesterday was lost, but because today is new. You open your eyes, feel the air, listen for your heartbeat, and whisper to yourself, I belong here, not in memory, not in the dream of what's to come. Here, in this breath, in this second that doesn't need a name, and as the day unfolds around you. The hum of traffic, the murmur of strangers, the fading light through the window. You realize that you no longer need to find meaning. You are the meaning. Your awareness, your tenderness, your quiet presence. They are the prayer, the poem, the purpose. You are not becoming anymore. You are being. And that, at last, feels like enough. There is a secret rhythm to life that only the patient can hear. It hums beneath everything. The wind in the grass, the slow curling of the ocean toward the shore, the breathing of trees as they wait for light. It has always been there, steady and ancient, but you forgot how to listen. You learned to live by clocks instead of seasons. You mistook urgency for purpose. You thought that speed meant success, that exhaustion meant devotion, that peace was something to be earned once everything was done. But life was never asking you to race it. It was asking you to meet it, to feel the heartbeat beneath the noise, to move in rhythm with its quiet grace. You are remembering now. It begins with stillness. A morning where you wake and notice the way sunlight pools across the sheets. A moment where you reach for your cup and realize your hands are not trembling anymore. A breath that comes easily, without effort or instruction. You sit in that silence and understand that something within you has slowed. And somehow, that slowness feels like coming home. Moving slowly is not laziness, it is reverence. It is the sacred act of refusing to rush your own becoming. You have spent so many years running towards something. Success, love, forgiveness, a sense of arrival. And now you see that the running only made the distance longer. Because peace cannot be chased, it can only be allowed. And allowing takes time. You begin to notice the small moments that you once overlooked, the sound of rain tapping against glass like a conversation with time. The way the air smells after it has forgiven the sky for storming, the fragile courage of a single leaf, trembling in wind, and yet refusing to let go. These moments have always existed, you just move too fast to meet them. Slowness has a way of revealing what's real. When the noise fades, what remains are the things that truly matter. The warmth of another hand, the sincerity of your own breath, the softness of your voice when you speak kindly to yourself. You realize that not every question needs an answer right away. Not every wound needs to close before it's ready. Not every path needs to be planned to be walked. There is space now, for unfolding, for trusting, for being. At first, slowing down feels foreign, almost frightening. The world around you still spins in urgency. People rush past with eyes full of elsewhere, and a part of you worries that you are falling behind. But the more you rest in stillness, the more you understand. You are not behind. You are simply on time for your own life. The modern world worships movement, but movement without awareness is just noise. You have begun to trade velocity for depth, and what a beautiful exchange that is. In slowness, you learn how to listen. To others, yes. But more importantly, to yourself. You hear the quiet voice that was buried beneath the rush, the one that whispers, "You are safe now. You can rest." You start making decisions from calm instead of fear. You start speaking when you mean it instead of when you're uncomfortable with silence. You begin to live less like a firework and more like a candle, steady, warm, and enduring. Your days stretch longer, not because they've changed, but because you are inside them now. You taste your food instead of devouring it. You notice the texture of light. You breathe as if every inhale is a promise that you will meet yourself gently this time. Sometimes, you remember who you used to be, the one who mistook busyness for meaning. You smile with compassion, not regret. Because even that restless version of you was searching for this, the permission to be slow, the permission to exist without urgency. Slowness has made you softer, not weaker, but wiser. It has taught you that strength is not in force, but in faith. Faith that everything unfolds when it's ready, not when you demand it to. Faith that you don't have to chase love to deserve it. Faith that your worth has never depended on speed. You notice how nature moves. The moon takes its time to become full. The ocean takes centuries to shape its stones. Even the stars travel through ages of darkness before they shine. And yet, none of them ever doubt their timing. They simply become when it is their turn too. You are learning to trust your own timing that way. You stop rushing your healing. You stop measuring your progress by how fast you've forgotten your pain. You understand now that healing is not linear. It's a spiral. Sometimes you circle back to old feelings, not because you failed, but because you are meeting them from a higher place each time. And that meeting takes time. There's a tenderness that lives in slow living. You begin to notice how people's faces change when you really listen. How conversations deepen when you don't fill every silence. How love grows richer when it's not forced to perform. You start saying no more often, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You say yes more softly, knowing that your energy is finite and sacred. You discover that peace is not about having more time, but about being fully inside the time you already have. Even grief changes when you slow down. It stops being a storm and becomes a tide. It comes, it teaches, it leaves, it returns. And each time it visits, it feels a little less like drowning and a little more like remembering. You sit beside your sorrow and realize it is softened too. It no longer screams. It simply sits beside you like an old friend, reminding you of how deeply you have loved. And that love, the kind that still breathes in the spaces between heartbreaks, that is what remains when everything else has fallen away. Slowness teaches you that you don't need to fill your life with noise to feel alive. That silence is not the absence of meaning. It is where meaning is born. That solitude is not emptiness. It is where the self becomes whole. When you live slowly, you start to feel your life instead of performing it. You start to realize that every breath is a tiny resurrection, every morning a small eternity. You stop rushing to arrive because you see now that you are always arriving, again and again, with each breath, with each choice to stay. Moving slowly does not mean the world stops changing. It means you stop missing its beauty while it does. You begin to notice that even your thoughts have a rhythm now. They don't collide. They flow. They don't demand. They reveal. And in that flow, something ancient inside you wakes up. The part of you that always knew how to be still, how to wait, how to trust. You find that your soul moves like water, not fire. It doesn't need to burn to be bright. It needs only to reflect the light it receives. And when people look at you now, they may not understand the calm you carry. They may mistake it for indifference, not knowing that it is the deepest form of devotion, to life, to truth, to peace. You have become the person who no longer chases meaning, but cultivates it slowly, patiently, deliberately. Your days are quieter, yes, but also fuller. Your heart beats slower, but it beats with purpose. You are learning that there is no prize for rushing, no finish line for becoming. There is only the continual unfolding of this moment and the grace of meeting it softly. So now, when the world pulls at you with urgency, you smile, you breathe, you let its noise wash past you like wind over still water. You know that speed does not equal significance. You know that being slow is not being lost. It is being present enough to see the beauty that haste cannot touch. You whisper to yourself as you walk through the day words you once would have called impossible. I have time. I am time. And with every breath, you begin to believe it. Because here, in the quiet pace of your own becoming, you finally understand. You were never meant to race toward life. You were meant to move with it, slowly, deliberately, beautifully. until the rhythm of your heart becomes the rhythm of the world itself. There comes a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when life no longer fits inside the plans you once made for it. It does not collapse, it expands. The walls you built from certainty begin to soften, and what once felt safe now feels too small. You stand in the center of your own unfolding and realize that you've reached the edge of everything you can control. It is here, on this threshold between knowing and not knowing, that a deeper kind of faith begins. For years you built your safety out of structure. You drew maps, made lists, clung to schedules, and convinced yourself that predictability meant peace. You trusted the measurable, the defined, the visible. And yet, even with all that planning, there was always a quiet unease beneath it. The faint awareness that life had its own rhythm, one that refused to be contained. You called that rhythm chaos. You called it uncertainty. You feared it because it asked you to loosen your grip. But what you didn't yet understand was that the unknown was never the enemy. It was the invitation. The unknown is not the absence of direction. It is the presence of possibility. To trust the unknown is to open your hands where once you held tightly. It is to stop asking life for guarantees and start listening for guidance. It is to live as though every step you take, even in darkness, is holy ground. At first it feels like falling. Every instinct in you screams for something solid to hold. You search for signs, for logic, for something to name the shape of what's happening. But the truth is, the unknown cannot be understood from the outside. It can only be experienced, and experience requires surrender. So you begin the practice of softening. You breathe, not to steady the world, but to steady yourself within it. You notice how each inhale feels like gathering courage, and each exhale feels like release. The breath itself becomes your teacher. A rhythm of trust, a reminder that even without control, you are still sustained. You learn to listen differently now. You stop demanding answers and start attending to whispers. You start to feel that life speaks in subtler ways. Through the tilt of a shadow, the ache of intuition, the sudden sense that what lies ahead may not need to be known to be right. There's a shift that happens here, a gentle but irreversible turning. You no longer crave certainty, you crave connection. You no longer seek control, you seek communion. And the unknown, once terrifying, begins to feel like company. It no longer looms over you like darkness. It stands beside you like a horizon. You begin to walk without demanding a destination. You trust that the path will appear under your feet, as it always has, step by step, the way dawn appears not all at once, but by degrees of light. There is a grace to living this way. You start to understand that uncertainty isn't emptiness, it's space. The space where new things can be born. The space where possibility breathes before form. You stop needing to define what's next because you trust that what's next will define itself when it's ready. It's not that fear disappears, it just loses its authority. Fear still visits, but you no longer mistake its voice for truth. You let it speak, and then you let it go. You tell it, "You may walk beside me, but you cannot lead." And somehow, that's enough. You start to feel time differently here. You stop measuring it in hours and begin to measure it in awareness. The way the air feels against your skin, the way your heartbeat answers the silence, the way you can now sit in uncertainty without needing to escape it. You realize that peace was never the absence of change. It was the absence of resistance to it. Every ending begins to look less like a death and more like a doorway. Every closed chapter feels like an invitation to breathe deeper, to trust wider. You begin to see patterns in the chaos. How the people who left made space for those who were meant to arrive. How the failures that once humiliated you taught you compassion for the brokenness of others. How every detour led you closer to the essence of who you were, always meant to become. You start to see that nothing was wasted. Not one ache, not one delay, not one unanswered prayer. Every unfulfilled longing was preparing the soil for something that required more space, more patience, more depth. Trusting the unknown does not mean you stop dreaming. It means you stop forcing the dream to arrive on your schedule. It means you let life shape the dream with you. There is freedom in this surrender. The kind of freedom that feels like standing in the middle of the ocean, not fighting the waves, just allowing them to carry you. At first, you fear drowning, but soon you realize that the water has been holding you the entire time. You remember moments from your past when everything seemed uncertain, and yet, somehow, you made it through. You think of all the nights you cried, convinced that the world had ended, only to wake in the morning and find that the light still came. You survived every moment you thought you couldn't. And that, too, is proof of something larger guiding you. You begin to trust that guidance now, not as something outside of you, but as something within. A quiet compass that doesn't point to direction but to alignment. It says not go there, but be here. And in being here, you find that clarity doesn't come from thinking. It comes from being. You start to live as if each day is a conversation with the universe. You speak through your actions, and life responds through its timing. You say thank you when things fall apart because you know that chaos is just creation rearranging itself. You say I trust you when the outcome is unclear because you know that uncertainty is just love's way of asking for your faith. There is a rhythm to this dance. You step forward, and the unknown steps back. You pause, and it moves closer. Sometimes it feels like play, sometimes like prayer. But always, it feels alive. And in that aliveness, you find meaning again. Not in certainty, but in connection. You stop asking, what will happen, and start asking, what wants to happen through me? The unknown becomes the field where you meet your own becoming. It is where creativity is born, where intuition grows roots, where courage learns to sing softly in your chest. You realize that trusting the unknown is another word for love. Because love, too, is a leap into what cannot be guaranteed. Love, too, requires you to believe before you can see. Love, too, asks you to risk your heart for the sake of something you can only feel, never control. And so, you live like that now, loving the process, trusting the unfolding, knowing that even when you cannot see the ending, you are still exactly where you are meant to be. Sometimes you stand beneath the night sky and feel the vastness pressing gently around you. You don't understand it, but you don't need to. You simply look up and whisper, show me how to trust this mystery. And the stars, silent and ancient, seem to whisper back, you already are. You smile then, softly, knowingly, because you realize that trusting the unknown doesn't mean never being afraid again. It means knowing that fear no longer decides your life. You will still stumble. You will still question. But now you will keep walking anyway. Because the unknown is no longer something to survive. It's something to belong to. And perhaps that is the greatest transformation of all, to no longer see uncertainty as an obstacle, but as the living space of wonder itself. To know that the future is not a threat, but a canvas waiting for your breath. And so, you breathe. You step forward. You whisper into the open air. I trust the unseen. I trust the unspoken. I trust the yet to be. And the world, vast and listening, responds in its quiet way. Through warmth, through timing, through everything that feels like grace. To say, and the yet to be trust you. There is a moment, a soft, almost imperceptible pause, when the long journey no longer feels like a search. You realize that the miles you've walked were never leading you somewhere else. They were guiding you back, to the very center of where you began. You are not arriving at something new. You are remembering something ancient. Something that has waited quietly beneath the noise of your striving, beneath every effort to prove, to earn, to become. All this time, what you were really seeking was not a place, not a person, not even peace itself. You were seeking the feeling of being home. Not in the world, but in yourself. For years, you mistook movement for meaning. You built your life around destinations, the next goal, the next love, the next version of yourself that might finally be enough. You ran toward light without realizing it had always been within you. You chased wholeness while carrying it in your own hands. And now, as you sit quietly in the glow of everything you've lived through, you finally understand. The journey was never about finding yourself. It was about learning how to stop abandoning yourself. Home is not something you build. It's something you remember. It's the space inside you that remained untouched by the chaos. The part that whispered, "Keep going," when everything else fell silent. The small, patient flame that never demanded attention, only the courage to turn toward it. You thought you had to become something extraordinary to be worthy of peace. But peace was never a prize. It was a birthright. It waited quietly for the moment you grew tired of running. And now, in this stillness, it meets you like an old friend. You sit down inside yourself for the first time in years, and the chair fits perfectly. The air feels familiar. You realize that nothing was missing after all. You were simply standing outside your own life, waiting for permission to enter. Coming home to yourself is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself with revelation or tears. It arrives softly, like forgiveness, like dusk light on the walls, like a long-held breath that finally exhales. It begins with noticing. You notice how your shoulders no longer tense at the sound of silence. You notice that your laughter comes easier, not because life has become lighter, but because you no longer confuse heaviness with importance. You notice that peace feels less like escape and more like belonging. You begin to see yourself not as a project to perfect, but as a garden to tend. There is no rush now. You know that everything blooms in its own time. You water, you wait, you trust, and in that patience, love takes root again. Not love for someone else, but love for the one who stayed through it all. You. You forgive yourself for the years you spent trying to earn your own worth. You forgive yourself for confusing chaos with passion, for mistaking endurance for love. You forgive yourself for every time you called survival strength, when what you really needed was rest. Forgiveness is how the door opens. Gentleness is how you step through. You start to speak to yourself differently now. No longer the harsh voice of comparison, no longer the anxious echo of not enough. Your inner voice has changed. It's softer, slower, like a hand resting quietly on your heart. It says, "I know, I'm here, I love you anyway," and that anyway becomes the most sacred word you know. You realize that coming home to yourself means learning how to stay. To stay even when it's uncomfortable. To stay even when you don't understand. To stay, especially when every instinct tells you to run. You sit with your sadness now without trying to fix it. You let joy arrive without interrogating its source. You stop labeling emotions as right or wrong. You let them all be guests in the house of your heart. Some stay longer than others, but all of them teach you something about being alive. You used to think healing was about erasing pain. Now you know it's about embracing truth. That pain was never the enemy, it was the messenger. And when you finally listened, it led you here to this deeper, quieter kind of peace. You no longer see your past as something to escape. You see it as soil, dark, fertile, necessary. Without it, nothing could have grown. Without the ache, you would never have learned tenderness. Without the loss, you would never have learned gratitude. Without the breaking, you would never have learned light. You look back now and whisper thank you, not because it was easy, but because it was real. You've stopped needing life to make sense. You've stopped demanding that every moment be beautiful. Instead, you allow it all, the joy and the doubt, the clarity and the confusion, to coexist without war. That coexistence is peace. Peace does not erase chaos, it expands to hold it. Peace does not promise permanence, it offers presence. You start to see that wholeness was never about fixing what's broken. It's about weaving your cracks into something sacred. A golden seam of experience that glows even in the dark. You are not the person who began this journey. You are the one who was shaped by the journey itself. You have become the quiet you once sought. You have become the patience you once prayed for. You have become the peace you once chased. Now, when you look into the mirror, you no longer search for evidence of worth. You see it reflected back in the calm of your own eyes. There is no need to prove anything. No need to perform. No need to be anyone but this. You stand in the center of your life and realize, this is it. Not someday, not when everything is certain, not when you are flawless. Now, you have come home. You walk through your days with a softer kind of confidence now. It's not the loud certainty of those who know all the answers. It's the quiet assurance of someone who knows how to listen. You trust that what leaves was never meant to stay. You trust that what stays will know how to grow. You trust that the timing of your life has never been wrong. The world no longer feels like something to conquer. It feels like something to converse with. You meet it with reverence, with curiosity, with a slow, unhurried kind of love. Everywhere you go, you carry the calm of someone who has stopped running. People may not know why your presence feels like peace, but you do. You've built it from within. You've become the home you once searched for. There will still be days of doubt, nights of fear, moments when you forget. But now you know the way back. It's always the same path. Through stillness, through breath, through kindness. And when you arrive again, when you feel that quiet settling deep in your chest, you'll smile and whisper, "I remember." Because that's what returning home truly means. Not that you never leave, but that you always return. You close your eyes. You breathe deeply. The air feels like forgiveness. The silence feels like love. And as you rest your hand over your heart, you realize that it's been here all along. The rhythm that carried you, the pulse that never left, the sound of home. You whisper one final prayer, not for change, not for clarity, but for gratitude. Thank you for every ending that became a beginning, for every darkness that became light, and for every version of me that tried its best to live. You open your eyes. The world looks the same, but you no longer see it through the lens of seeking. You see it as it is, raw, tender, alive. And in that seeing, you know without needing to know, you have arrived. You are home. Not because life has become perfect, but because you have made peace with its imperfection. Because you have stopped waiting for someone to save you, and realized that you were always the one you were waiting for. And now, at last, you rest, not in stillness alone, but in wholeness. A peace that breathes, a love that stays, a truth that hums quietly beneath it all. You are the home you were looking for. It's just a different kind of quiet for each ending. Not total quietness, but gently. That sort of silence that does not demand even emotion from you. Just being. After the long journey, after all the teachings and letting go, this is left, the gentle stillness of wholeness. You have traversed the black without a compass. You have made friends with the departed and also loved the remaining ones. You have learned to be aware of your own breath when the world got silent, and at some moment on your path, you discovered healing was not a spot to reach. It was a particular manner of walking. Now, as the trip comes to a rest in you, you start to realize that nothing has actually come to an end. This calmness, this being here, and this nonchalant mode of living, they are not the end. They are a process of unfolding. You are not putting a book away. You are finding out how to be a part of it, slowly, page by page, and breath by breath. There will still be moments of doubt. You will still stumble, still forget. You will still have days when the light feels far away. But you will no longer mistake those moments for failure. You will know that forgetting is part of remembering, that falling is part of walking, that loss is part of love's long conversation. This is what it means to continue, to live not as someone seeking answers, but as someone who has learned to hold the questions gently, to trust that even when you do not know where the path is leading, it is still leading you. You will find yourself beginning again, in small ways, in quiet ways. A sunrise, a smile, a step forward that feels lighter than the one before. The world will keep opening its hands to you. And now, you will know how to open yours in return. Because you understand that beginnings and endings are not opposites. They are mirrors, each reflecting the other, each teaching you how to let go, how to stay, how to begin again. You have learned the art of being here, fully, softly, bravely. And that is everything. Let this not be a conclusion, but a blessing. May you continue to walk slowly. May you continue to love deeply. May you continue to trust what cannot yet be seen. May you return, again and again, to the quiet home within you that holds every version of who you've been, and welcomes each new one without hesitation. You are not finished. You are unfolding. You are not ending. You are becoming. And as you breathe, as the world hums quietly around you, you realize the story was never about letting go. It was about learning how to hold life gently enough to let it flow through you. You smile, and somewhere between the inhale and the exhale, between what was and what will be, you whisper the simplest, most honest prayer of all. Thank you. And in that stillness, life whispers back, dash, 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 this, 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 but this, 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 do this, this, and this, 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 and this, this, or this, this, and this, 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 and this, 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 and this, 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 this. You're welcome. Keep going.